You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. This is 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. One of the basic functions of this program is to discuss in some depth local issues and races before voters have to go to the polls on Election Day. From now until November 4th, we will have candidates and representatives of key issues. That includes Cincinnati City Council candidates, candidates for the Kentucky governor's race, and spokespersons for several school levies. We begin this morning with two issues before voters in Ohio. The Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens is one of the region's oldest and most popular attractions. Over 1.1 million people visit every year, including 330,000 students and adults who participate in education programs. The Cincinnati Zoo has become famous for its ability to upgrade its naturalistic displays to improve the quality of life for the animals and the ability of visitors to appreciate the animals in their natural context. The levy before Hamilton County voters is a temporary 5-year renewal of an existing levy that passed in 1998. The old levy was for 0.42 mils. The new levy will be for 0.4 mils. It will raise about $6.2 million a year, which represents a $300,000 reduction in the current levy. A property owner with a $100,000 house will pay less than $10 a year, and that's slightly less than they pay right now. To discuss the proposed zoo levy, I am joined by Greg Hudson, the president and CEO of the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens. Greg, welcome to Newsmakers.
Right, thanks, Dan.
This is a levy, actually, that voters in Hamilton County are familiar with. This, I think, is the fourth time, if this passes, that it will be renewed. So this is not brand new material or brand new ground for people, but there is something a little bit different this time. You, like anybody else trying to get a levy on, has to now go through a review commission.
Right.
What was that process like?
I'm new to the directorship to about 2.5 years, so this is my first time through the process with the Tax Levy Review Committee. And they've added a new wrinkle this year with the independent audit that was conducted before we actually.
Now this is an audit that's more than just a financial audit, because you would have always done all financial audits.
Every single year the zoo, as part of our nonprofit.
This is more of a performance
this
audit.
is what they call an efficiency audit.
Okay.
Where they come through, look at all the aspects of our operation, look at a lot of the operational things to see if there's any efficiencies we can gain from expenses and those types of things. And it was about a 6-week process. An independent firm came out, made that assessment, went through every aspect of our organization, and then made a report back to the Tax Levy Review Commission.
Was that a firm that you chose, or that the commissioners chose?
Actually the Tax Levy Review Commission.
Okay, the Review Commission got to choose that. Did they find things? Did they suggest changes in the way you operate the zoo?
Right. They came through and made some recommendations on some things that they thought could help us in trying to continue to hone our expense base. In the last 2 years, our overall expenses have dropped by over $500,000. They think that we can continue to do that by getting some labor efficiencies, by doing a job study that really looks at the organization where we can get some economies of scale by combining jobs and some of the skills like that. Also some things in some of the central receiving and purchasing things. So there's about $500,000 in recommendations and savings, which, as we're working towards this new contract with the county, or in the contract with the county that was set in 1998, we are going to renew this levy, or the proposal is to renew it at a reduced rate of $300,000. So we've been working towards that over the last 5 years.
So that reduction in the amount of money being raised by this proposed levy, is that a direct reflection of the influence of this review commission? Or was that something that you were intending to come for a smaller levy anyway?
Well, it was part of the levy that was approved in 1998. There was an actual contract that was signed, and the renewal amount that was in that contract for this year. Just as we went through the process this time, we've negotiated what the renewal cap will be for if there is a renewal the next year. Yeah.
So the point is, the interest of the commissioners and the review commission is to keep drawing down the size of the levy, right?
Right.
Let me ask let's approach that same sort of issue from another angle. The zoo is incredibly successful. Draw 1.1 million people a year. It's very popular.
Right.
Why do you need public support at all?
Well, you know, zoos are a very expensive operation to run. We have a very large economic impact into the community, but the tax levy dollars go directly to the care and the feeding of the animals. So our overall operating budget is about almost $20 million, and this represents almost a third of our expense.
So this is a big hunk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So if this was taken away and you had to put that on the cost of tickets on gate,
yes.
How much? I mean, what are we talking about? What's it now cost for an adult?
It costs $11.50 for an adult, and $9 for children. And our family membership, which we have about almost 60,000 families in the Cincinnati area that are part of our membership, are about $66. So those would have to go up substantially in order to make up that kind of revenue. When you're talking about a little over 1 million people coming through every year.
And compared to other great zoos, you know, and
sure.
Cincinnati really operates on that level of the nation's best zoos.
Sure.
If you're looking at the Columbus Zoo or the San Diego Zoo, do they get public funds, and at what sort of level?
Sure. Let me just put it in perspective, just zoos in Ohio.
Okay.
There's 5 major zoos in Ohio, Columbus being one of them that you just mentioned. Columbus, for instance, just right up the road, going for a renewal in the spring. Ours will be in November, theirs will be in the spring. 0.75 mils that will generate about $18.2 million a year. So almost 3 times as big of a levy subsidy. Now, of course, theirs goes to capital as well, but all capital improvements that we do at the zoo, we have to go out and raise privately. So this is an operating only subsidy.
Okay, this is an operating only, so that when, for example, if people who have been to the zoo in the last few years know that there are the new elephant area, elephant and giraffe area. We're all familiar with the gorilla area a few years ago, and all of these new, the insectarium. This money doesn't go for that?
It goes to help in the care and the feeding of the animals.
But not the construction.
But not the construction. The actual capital dollars to raise to build those new exhibits have all come from the private sector.
Okay, so besides the gate, but people pay when they come through or through memberships, and what comes from this tax money, you're out there raising private dollars, like every other not-for-profit, to invest in.
We actually go out and raise private money to help on the operating side. We raise about between $1 million to $1.5 million a year to help supplement the operating, as well as between $2 to $3 million a year for the capital things that we're.
Does the zoo run in the black? Are you running a balanced budget?
Yes, we are. We've run a balanced budget for the last 10 years.
Okay. So, and what about endowment? We've
been able to build that, and the endowment, like everybody's own portfolio, has gone through the ups and downs of the stock market, but it continues to grow. We put between $1 million and $2 million a year into our endowment, and we've got it now up to where it's just above $20 million, which is very good for a zoo, one of the leading zoos in the country with an endowment. So we're very proud of that, but we're continuing to put more and more emphasis on that to help us in the balancing of the attrition that's happening with the levy, so that we can continue to draw off that. So that's a balanced plan that we've had with the tax levy review and with the commissioners, and they understand that.
Yeah, for not-for-profits, that endowment is a critical element in the total funding.
Yes, it is.
And people sometimes don't understand how all that gets put together. One of the things about the zoo is it's truly a regional asset.
Yeah.
And I suspect you probably track where your visitors come from. And they're not just people coming from Hamilton County.
Right.
Given that fact, given also something we talk about on this show all the time, the sprawl out into surrounding counties, Butler, Claremont, Warren County, has any consideration been given to trying to enlarge the funding base and maybe look for a multi-county funding base, which would make everybody's share a lot smaller, but recognize that the zoo isn't just a Hamilton County institution, much less a Cincinnati institution?
Well, you know, the best way that we've been able to do that, because the economic impact happens in Cincinnati and happens right in the heart of Hamilton County, and the levy, we feel like, is a good way for that to get that multiplier effect of almost over $88 million a year into the economy. The best way that we feel like we can make inroads into those outlying markets is to drive our members and drive those people into the gate and have them spend their money here in Hamilton County, in the heart of Cincinnati. And so that's the most effective way for us to do it at this point. Now, if we could ever agree to that, that would be future down the line. We're still trying to, I personally am still trying to make sure that I understand all the nuances of Hamilton County and that relationship. And I think we've honed that very well over the last 2 years since I've been here to try and really establish a very collaborative relationship with the county commissioners and the Tax Levy Review Commission.
Before you came,
sure,
in the last round of levy renewals, there was some controversy. I don't want to go back and deal with all of that, but one question I want to make sure is clear that emerged that last time was how the campaign to renew the levy is being funded and whether or not tax monies are being used to convince people to spend more tax money. This effort to renew the levy, where are you getting the money to do that?
There's a separate organization that's been formed of supporters called the Friends of the Zoo that have gone out and raised the money privately for this campaign. So everything is being funded from a private group, nonprofit group that has gone out and raised those funds independently away from zoo operations. So there's no commingling of funds. This is an independent campaign that's been taken, a political campaign that's been taken on by the Friends of the Zoo. And so they've gone out and raised that money from private sector and corporations here, and have been and it's been a very well received campaign and supported by a broad section of the city.
Just to sort of at our end here, what do you see fresh, new? What's happening? What are the trends at the zoo that maybe we can see in the next couple of years?
Well, you know, the zoo is truly one of the county's treasures and one of the crown jewels in the Queen City, and that's been a great thing for me, a very big responsibility as I've come in to take the reins over the last 2.5 years. And but we've got some great things on the docket. We've got some great things with some of our signature conservation programs, like a new cheetah exhibit that's coming down the line. We've got a new education facility that we're going to be opening up that will really showcase our partnership with Cincinnati Public Schools, which we have a full-time high school out at the zoo. So there's some really neat things that are coming up, as well as I think we're going to hopefully make some inroads in our parking, which is a big thing. So
definitely
that's
a big
exciting
thing for anybody who goes. Thank you very much for being here, and we're going to follow this issue and talk to you on the night of November 4th for sure.
Great. Well, thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Stay tuned. After the break, the proposed statewide bond issue to improve Ohio's ability to nurture technology innovation and the jobs of the future. Welcome back. In the late 19th century, Ohio was at the center of the Industrial Revolution. The state had a mature economy that provided a pool of capital reserves and organizational talent that could assemble and lead the new style of corporation. The state also had a highly skilled workforce that could be reorganized and fit into the demands of factory production. And geographically, Ohio had access to the raw materials that went into steel, the backbone of the industrial age, and a mature rail network that connected it to the national markets. Over the last 40 years, those advantages have slowly disappeared as the industrial age has given way to computers, high tech, and the global economy. Ohioans have been working in corporate R&D labs, in university classroom and laboratories, and in high-tech incubators to catch the wave of a newer economic trend. For 25 years, the state government has invested in that effort in a variety of ways. The current governor, Bob Taft, has raised the level of state involvement with what he calls the Third Frontier Initiative. One component of that program asked state voters this November to authorize a special bond issue to strengthen the state's ability to invest in new technology. If approved by the voters, the proposed bond issue will give Ohio the authority to issue up to $500 million of bonds over the next 10 years. These bonds will be paid for out of the state's general revenue fund and will not automatically increase an individual's tax bill. The funds raised by the bond issue will be administered by the Third Frontier Commission as advised by the Third Frontier Advisory Board. One of the local members of that advisory board, James Anderson, is the president and CEO of Children's Hospital Medical Center. and he's with us this morning. He's joined by Jonathan Holifield, the Executive Director of CincyTech USA, an initiative of the Greater Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce. Jim, welcome to Newsmakers. Jonathan, welcome back.
All right.
You just keep coming back.
Yes.
Jonathan, how would you evaluate Ohio's status right now in relationship to what's called the new economy?
Ohio has a great deal of assets, but they have only begun to be leveraged in a way to really experience the kind of economic growth that's commensurate with our aspirations as a state. Over the last 40 years, our per capita income peaked in 1960 at about 6th in the nation.
And we're about 7th in the nation in terms of population,
In terms of
right?
population.
So we peaked in income. Okay.
That's right.
Where are we now?
We plunged to about 22nd in the nation in per capita income. That has dramatic impacts on quality of life, state revenue funds. We're not a backwater state. We're Ohio, and a power in the global, not just national, but global economy. And this is an opportunity to move up the food chain.
Okay. Jim, a lot of people would think of Children's Hospital as a consumer of all kinds of technology. I mean, anybody who's been to a hospital in recent years knows that it's amazing what the medical profession can do now, and you're really very dependent. But that's not the only reason you're interested in this. I mean, Children's Hospital Medical Center is also, you see yourself as a creator of a lot of this too, right?
Very much so. At Cincinnati Children's, while we have a very large clinical activity and clinical presence and taking care of our kids, grandchildren, yours as well, the other part of our business is a very substantial research business. In the last fiscal year, we had just under $100 million of money coming into Cincinnati Children's to pay for researchers, technicians, capital equipment that is devoted to creating new knowledge and new technology, new ways of treating children to understand the source of their disease and ultimately the cure for that disease. And it's really very much like what Dr. Sabin did a number of decades ago. It's this process of discovery and applying this discovery to changing the way pediatric health occurs.
So you're saying $100 million last year. Was last year atypical? Was it part of a long-term trend?
It's very much part of a long-term trend. Our growth rate in research over the last 5 to 7 years has been in the between 15 and 20% each year.
And where does that money come from?
The largest single source is the federal National Institutes of Health, which is really the most competitive source for biomedical research funds. And about 2/3 of that sum of money comes from the NIH. And that's supplemented by external funding from industry, from other federal agencies, and other organizations interested in the creation of new knowledge and advancement of that knowledge.
If this bond issue passes, will some of that money, at least potentially in theory, come to a place like Children's Hospital?
We're certainly hopeful, and we will be competing for that, because what we really need is money to take the knowledge that's created out of this substantial research activity into products and things that can create jobs, be sold, be exploited in the broader marketplace, and really create the kind of high-paying jobs that Jonathan talks about.
And that's really the key. And the last time you were here, which was I think about 2 months ago, we were talking about the ability, it's not just the theoretically creating something in the lab, but then bringing that to market so that there are jobs and income from it.
That is absolutely right. Historically, Ohio has been a production state, not as highly ranked on the innovation, research, and commercialization, but on the production side. We have to move up the food chain. Increasingly, the adoption of new technologies by traditional industries have eliminated a lot of jobs, not to mention the competitive pressures of low-cost labor and low-cost land overseas.
Let's talk about some tough realities. The last 3 years have not been good for any state, Ohio included. State budget crisis is just a reality. This bond issue, even though it doesn't automatically kick up it does raise the state's indebtedness,
Right.
and it has to be paid out of general revenue funds. Is that a realistic and good thing at this point in time, given the state's, does this endanger our bonding rating? Does this create other pressures by passing this?
I'll take an initial shot at it. It's 2003 and we are where we are is the easy answer, but the more difficult answer is if we don't make these investments now, we will continue on the precipitous decline of lowering per capita income in the state. It is an investment at a critical moment in Ohio's industry or history to force a transition from a traditional production-based economy to more of an innovation, research, and commercialization-based economy.
And there's been a lot of analysis done about the appropriateness of the size, and there's arguments that this really isn't enough, that what really ought to happen is the amount of additional funds from this source should be $1 billion or $1.5 billion. The flip side of the analysis is what can we afford? What can the state afford? What can it include in its debt structure that won't require us to raise taxes and will provide a good return? And from our standpoint, we've got the hardest part. We've got the new knowledge and
Right.
the people interested in creating these new methods that can be commercialized. What we don't have is an infrastructure and the financing to take it from those great new ideas into commercial application, into new jobs, and what will really be high-paying, fascinating new sources of employment.
Well, you're on the advisory committee, and I tried to just give a sketch of that. There's the group that will actually, I guess, appropriate the funds, but then that's a relatively small group, but then there's this group of advisors. There's a number of local people on that. You're one of those. Give me a practical example of how you think some of this money might actually get used. Maybe as it applies to something developed at Children's Hospital. I don't know. Give me a practical example of how this might get used.
Well, there's an application in process right now that would benefit from this source of funds that effectively takes genome research that we're undertaking at Children's, does the very important basic work with that, applies it to the ability to predict disease in children and in adults, requires substantial computational capacity so that the money from the third frontier can go to funding these steps between the new knowledge and the practical commercial ability
Like
to
helping a business get started?
would start a business, would invest in people, equipment, space to provide the seed capital to begin the business to produce a commercial product that will generate revenue and jobs.
We hear a lot about biotech as one area that Cincinnati might be really good at because of places like Children's. But what are some of the other areas? I mean, we also have a tremendous tradition here in machine tools, for example, and that kind of work. Any help in that area?
Absolutely. The 5 focus areas of the third frontier are bioscience, information technology, power and propulsion. GE is a great example of that. Instruments, controls, and sensors in the advanced manufacturing area, a more Northeast Ohio game as well, and advanced materials. Within those 5 sectors, there are myriad opportunities for traditional industries in Ohio that have afforded us the wonderful quality of life that we have experienced to shift or transition. Perhaps instead of producing machine tools, you now produce certain medical devices or become the best in the world or best in class in that area. There are wonderful opportunities there. Also, Jim mentioned these investments. This bond issue is a tremendous transition from the state of Ohio's traditional mode of economic development. This will allow $500 million for investments in non-capital assets. As an accountant told me, essentially you're investing in brains. Well, that's an appreciable asset as opposed to a building or a computer, et cetera. We're investing in the most appreciable asset around.
We only have about 40 seconds left. What is it you're going to have to do to convince the voters out there, do you think, to vote for this on November 4th?
I think there are 3 things. One is that this is an investment in new jobs, high-paying jobs that will be very much a part of the future of this country. Second is comfort that this is not going to require new taxes, and we believe it will not. And then third, that it has the advantage of keeping our kids at home and providing the kind of jobs they need.
Okay, thank you for being here. We're going to be watching this for the next 7 weeks. And thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Next week, one of the area's contested school levy issues. Have a good week.